I finally did it. With the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake just around the corner this summer, I was on a mission to beat every mainline Tony Hawk game in release order leading all the way up to the release of the new remake. And with me completing Proving Grounds, I have finally live streamed and played through every major Tony Hawk game, from the legendary beginnings of Pro Skater till the bittersweet decline of Proving Grounds. I got to relive them all on stream with you. And in this video, I'm not just ranking these games, I'm walking through the journey and sharing my thoughts and experiences. So let's break it down game by game, memory by memory, and put each of these games on a tier list. For this video though, I'll be splitting up the franchise into 3 eras: the nostalgic, the peak, and the downfall. So let's not waste any more time and hop right into the nostalgic era. Starting it off with Pro Skater 1, the one that started it all. This game is the foundation of everything that is to come of the series, but to me, it honestly feels more like a nostalgic time capsule than a go-to today. The tight 2-minute timers for each run, limited basic tricks, and the unforgiving physics made this game have a charming rawness to it. I grew up playing this originally on the N64, so getting to experience it on the PS1 was a much smoother, more polished ride. One of my favorite things about this game has always been its timeless roster of maps. Warehouse, school, and mall reign supreme over 90% of the catalog. Some may call it a nostalgia bias, I just call it pure, well-crafted level design. The maps are relatively compact, yet there's so much to do in each one, especially when you're up against the clock in the career mode. But anytime I wanted to hop back into free skate, I always gravitated back to these classics. They're a perfect blend of challenge, creativity, and pure fun. The downsides to this game though, were there's no manuals and no reverts, so the combo potential is super limited. It's arcade purity, but it hasn't aged as well as the others. I personally am not much of a fan of the time-based approach to these games, but as an arcade-style game, I can respect and enjoy the concept of replayability it provides. People may be disappointed in this ranking, but Pro Skater 1 is going to kick off this tier list with a solid C tier. The saving grace of this game was the map selection and killer soundtrack, but when held against the catalog, its age limitations hold it down lower in the rankings. Pro Skater 2 is where Tony Hawk went from pretty good to an early childhood phenomenon. The first game walked, this one sprinted. Manuals were finally introduced here, letting you connect tricks and combos in ways that we hadn't previously been able to do, and suddenly high scores started to skyrocket. The level design in Pro Skater 2 is just as iconic as the previous one. From School 2 to Venice Beach and even Philadelphia, each spot felt crafted to maximize flow, letting players piece together huge lines and find hidden gaps that kept us exploring for hours. It's pure, undiluted skateboarding. Nothing more, nothing less. The addition of Create a Skater and Park Editor meant you could put yourself in the game and build your own dream skate spot. It struck a perfect balance between challenge and creativity, which is exactly what the series was needing going forward. I don't have much else to say about this game other than Pro Skater 2 is a classic pure Tony Hawk at its finest. It's a huge step forward from its predecessor and a big piece of what made the franchise a household name, giving it a deserving spot in the B tier. Now on to Pro Skater 3, the game that mastered the formula. It's the first Tony Hawk game to introduce reverts, letting you keep your combo alive after touching back down. A small addition with massive implications. That change meant you were no longer forced to cut your tricks when you landed a vert move. Now you can revert into a manual and keep your flow going. It opened up scoring possibilities and made the gameplay more exhilarating and creative. Levels like Canada, Airport, and Cruise Ship are classics for a reason. They're designed to maximize creativity and flow. The missions were more ambitious, adding a bit more character to each map and letting players complete goals in a non-linear fashion. Pro Skater 3 feels less restrictive and more polished in nearly every way. It's a perfect blend of the first two titles, pure gameplay and a forward-thinking approach. There's a feeling of pure freedom here, a feeling that made Tony Hawk series a superstar. We're gonna give Pro Skater 3 an A tier, but the peak of this era was truly Pro Skater 4. It dropped the 2-minute timer altogether in career and let you explore at your own pace. Instead of being rushed to complete goals, you can find missions organically by interacting with NPCs, adding a small spark of story and context to a previously pure arcade experience. This change made the world feel much more alive. Levels were massive and filled with hidden missions and clever design elements that rewarded exploration. The addition of spine transfers and other small tweaks kept the gameplay feeling fresh and challenging. One small thing that I felt was worth noting was I thought that Pro Skater 3 and 4 had the best art and graphic style of the entire Tony Hawk discography. From the way that the skaters looked, to the color palette of each map, even down to the skater select screens, there's nothing that quite catches the charm like these games had. Pro Skater 4 struck a perfect balance, retaining the soul of the first three while adding its own unique flavor. It set the stage for the dramatic shift that we'd soon see in the underground era, but it kept its roots firmly in pure skateboarding, landing it in the A tier. It's now time to move into the peak chapter of the Tony Hawk series, an era where the franchise evolved beyond simple time crunch challenges and introduced full-fledged storytelling, customization, and a far expanded level of freedom. When Tony Hawk's Underground dropped in 2003, it wasn't just another Pro Skater sequel, but a full-blown reinvention. For the first time in the series, we weren't just picking up a pro skater and completing objectives in a looping time crunch. We were creating our own skater and living out a skateboarding rags to riches story. The narrative follows your custom character, a local skater trying to make it big while dealing with an absolute snake of a best friend, Eric Sparrow. If you played this game back in the day, you probably still have strong feelings about that guy. The addition of a story mode gave Underground a level of immersion that we'd never seen before. You weren't just completing random challenges, you were grinding up the ranks, earning sponsors, and traveling from your hometown to major skate spots like New York, Tampa, and Moscow, while growing a connection to the journey you were carving. Mechanically, Underground expanded Tony Hawk Pro Skater's 4 freedom by introducing the ability to hop off your board, climb obstacles, and explore levels in all new ways. This opened up so many new possibilities for level design and objectives, making it feel like a true adventure rather than just a trick-based arcade game. Thug took the Tony Hawk formula and evolved it into something personal, easily one of the best in the franchise, making it another welcome title to the A tier. If Underground was about telling a personal underdog story, Underground 2 was about throwing all that out the window and embracing absolute chaos. This game is essentially Tony Hawk meets Jackass, and it made no apologies for it. Even though the game starts right after Underground 1, the game ditches the heartfelt story of Thug in favor for a globe-trotting destruction tour. Tony Hawk and Bam Margera each draft a team of skaters, and you travel to different cities and countries, competing in absurd challenges like launching yourself into buildings, riding on mechanical bulls, and spray painting graffiti on monuments. The levels are bigger, the objectives are crazier, and the humor is, well, very 2004. If you grew up watching Jackass, the game was everything you could want, but if you preferred Thug's grounded story, Underground 2 probably felt like a step in a very different direction. It played just as smoothly as the first game, but the gameplay kind of felt a little less structured. Instead of building your own skate career, you were causing mayhem to level inspired by real-world locations. The addition of focus mode and the ability to play as wacky characters like a shrimp vendor or Benjamin Franklin pushed the game into a full-blown arcade insanity. Underground 2 is a divisive game in the series. Some fans love its ridiculousness, while others felt like it strayed too far from what made Underground great. Personally, I had a blast revisiting it, and definitely would put it in my Mount Rushmore of skate games, but I can see why it's not for everyone. I'll give this rating a B tier. American Wasteland is the one that gets slept on though from this era. Having to follow up and live in the shadow of the Underground predecessors was no easy task, but Thaw excelled at it. Open world, no load times, and a build your own skate park out of the destruction of LA story? Besides Underground 1, how is this not everyone's favorite Tony Hawk game? After the insanity of Underground 1 and 2, American Wasteland tried to take the best of both worlds, bringing back a more structured story while still embracing the over-the-top fun. But its biggest selling point? It was the first seamless open-world skateboarding experience. The game took place in Los Angeles with different neighborhoods connected by tunnels you could skate through without ever having to hit a loading screen. At the time, this was a huge deal. The idea of an open-world skating game sounded like a dream come true. While the world wasn't that massive, the game still had some incredible spots, including Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and Santa Monica. The trick system is refined, BMX bikes were introduced for some extra variety, and the story revolved around building a legendary skate park by collecting pieces from around LA, which is the coolest concept ever, and I would have killed to see a movie adaptation of this game because I'd love to see the skate ranch built in real life. Yeah, the BMX missions may have felt unnecessary, and the transitions between zones were a tad bit janky, but still, there's something charming about its punk DIY energy, even if the execution wasn't perfect. With that said, it still delivered some of the best skating in the franchise, making it my personal top S tier game. It's unfortunate to say that Thaw would be the absolute peak of the series, and everything afterwards would start to rapidly crumble down a depressive decline, starting with the dumpster fire that is Downhill Jam. So, this exists. A Tony Hawk racing game where you're constantly barreling downhill. Apparently this game came to be because Tony himself really loved the Downhill Jam level from the first Pro Skater and wanted to expand on that idea further. It's not really the worst thing I've ever played, but it's definitely not what I would consider a Tony Hawk game. The soul just isn't there, levels are flat, controls are stiff, and outside of a couple tracks like San Francisco, it's easily forgettable. I tried to stream this game for the viewers of the series, but honestly I just hit a wall of redundancy that I couldn't shake off. It's the same 3 to 5 objectives repeating across only 6 maps, and if you try to switch your character, there's no cross progression, so you have to do it all over with each character. Fuck that. We're throwing this game at the bottom of the list with a deserving F and just moving on to the next. Project 8 was supposed to be the return to form and back to pure skateboarding after the wild detour of Underground and American Wasteland, but it fell a little flat. The game tried adding a realistic twist with the Nail the Trick feature, letting you control your feet directly in a slow-mo fashion. At first, it seemed like a clever addition, but in practice, it felt awkward and restrictive. It disrupted the flow we fell in love with in the first place, and had they not put so much of a focus on this feature, I think the energy could have improved a lot of other features in this game. The story was another starting from zero and attempting to break into Tony's elite Project 8 team. It seemed promising, but fell victim to weak missions and uninspiring level design. The world just felt less alive, more barren, and the magic that made the previous titles great just wasn't there. I have a love-hate relationship with the graphic direction of this game because I love the PS3 era of graphics and the attempt of a more realistic looking game. However, there's just something about the peak era of the Tony Hawk games that just set the standard of looks that I couldn't stray away from. Project 8 isn't a bad game by any means, it's serviceable, but it highlights the franchise losing its way. The soul of Tony Hawk was pure, fast-paced creativity, not cinematic tricks and slow-motion gimmicks. I'm not going to flush away this game entirely for an F tier. I think it's well deserving of the middle-of-the-road C tier. And finally, we have reached the final game besides the 1 and 2 remake. Proving Ground was a tough one. It tried to blend all the best elements from the previous game's story, tricks, and exploration, but instead it ended up feeling unfocused and messy. The game introduces 3 different career paths you can pursue: hardcore, rigor, or career, adding some roleplay-like elements to the formula, but these paths felt shallow and uninspiring, failing to add much depth or replayability. Proving Ground's level design also kind of felt uninspired. The missions were often frustrating, and the controls felt less precise, with heavy and awkward physics that made it not as satisfying as in the classics. The feeling of flow and creativity that defined this series seemed all but gone here. It's a shame, because you can see the potential of the team trying to make something ambitious, but it fell short in nearly every department. Proving Ground feels more like a collection of ideas than a finished game. The ending came so abruptly in my stream I wasn't even expecting for the credits to roll when they did, but maybe that's just how the series was meant to go, out with a whisper and an honest rating of a D tier game. So where exactly does that leave the Tony Hawk series? Somewhere between Legendary and Lost. The early games, especially the Thugs, THPS 3 and 4, and American Wasteland are absolute classics. They hold up, they're fun, and they remind you why skateboarding games mattered in the first place. The later games had some good ideas, some misfires, but nothing ever quite recaptured the magic. Thank you guys for watching, and a major shout out to everyone who tuned in during the live stream playthroughs. This series was a total passion project for me, and revisiting these games reminded me why I fell in love with skateboarding games in the first place. I'm not sure which game series I'm going to do next, but if you have any suggestions, leave them down in the comments, and until next time, I'll see you in the next one.